Hello, everybody. Welcome to Saturday or Sunday for any crazy Australians up way too early, or I suppose people in Tokyo, et cetera, et cetera. Welcome to all. Before we get started, I thought it might be nice to discuss this wall of doom behind me. A client just brought them in from Oklahoma. Up top is a 1974 50-watt lead, 1987. And down below that is the big boy, the 1968 Marshall Major. So look for those on the channel in the coming days, as well as the 66 Marshall 1973 and the 64 Vox AC10. And I guess what was on the bench right before this Marshall's arrived was a 72 Deluxe Reverb, and it doesn't suck either. Some weeks are more interesting than others. Speaking of interesting things, the pyramid of mystery boxes is growing, and all the stuff is in, so I'll be making an announcement soon, and I will give you guys here on this chat a preview. The other day, I reached 45,000 subscribers. Thank you to everyone. That means a lot to me. It's amazing. I never dreamed that this many people will be interested in what I do, or the fact that it was me presenting it. So it's humbling, and it's an honor, and it just means a lot to me. But the channel has been growing very fast, and we are sneaking up on 50K. I used to do thank yous, reach 1,000, reach 2,000, reach 3,000, 10,000, 25,000. I used to do thank you videos for each one of those. And the channel started to grow to the point where I stopped because I thought it'd be self-congratulatory. And that's not what I want the channel to be. But 50K is a hell of a milestone, as is 45K. So 50K is going to be upon us pretty soon, and I wanted to do something special for everyone. So I'm not going to give away the entire thing, but the parts necessary for that something special are all in those boxes. And it's going to be something that you can win, but there's going to be a cost to play, and none of it will go to me. We're going to do a big charity drive for St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital here in Memphis. They do children's cancer, and if a family of a child with cancer has to come here and live for 6 months while the child undergoes treatment, they have room, a place to stay, food to eat, support for the families, as well as the care for their child. And it's a fantastic charity. And so I want to give back both to everyone here who's supporting me we'll do a giveaway of a groovy thing, but also truly give back from the entire channel as a whole to a worthy cause. So it'll be a 50K celebration for the channel, but it's not going to be about the channel. It's what I can do and you can do, we can do together through the channel. So I think that's going to be fun to talk about and to watch the things come out of those boxes and turn into something new. So let's scroll up and see what I missed while I was congratulating myself on the Marshalls and for being such a good person to do a charity thing, right? I semi-kid. Hey, Fred Frederici, thank you. Happy Thanksgiving to you, too. Yo, Kim, I have never had a Burns Royal Bluesman. Sorry. Thank you, Joe. Emilio's down there in Mexico City, recapping a 65 twin reverb reissue. That's not a bad thing to be doing on a Saturday. Hey, Sergeant Grinch. Let's see, a question from John Stuke. Evening from Stockholm. Nice, Alan. Cold and everything. Let's see, John Stuke. Or is it Stuck? Sorry, correct me if I'm incorrect. What would you recommend for current production or affordable new old stock EL 84s for modern Vox style amp, specifically a Victory VC35? Thank you, John, for that. I've had really good luck with the TAD 70 EL84s. Almost said 7025s. And still, if you get them from a good vendor, the JJs are quite good. Electro Harmonics can be a good choice, again, if you get it from a good vendor. I'm not sure about the stock on those right now. Tongue saws are usually fine if you can get them. My preference used to be, and hopefully they're available again at some point in larger quantities at a lower price, are the 7189s that the tube store has been selling. But generally speaking, you don't need to use new old stock unless you just have money to burn. I'd rather blow one JJ a year than blow one $300 Mullard every 3 years. Find a good vendor that you have a relationship with. The vendor matters almost more than the brand. And when it comes to an EL84 amp, it really depends on whether the amp was designed by someone who actually looks at the data sheet. So no more than maybe 340 volts plate to cathode, not 400 plus as you'll find in many amps. And who doesn't just copy what Vox and JMI did in 1959 and slap a 100 ohm screen grid resistor on there on an amp which has 420 volts on the plate, only exceeding the plate voltage max rating by 120 volts and giving no protection to the screen whatsoever. And then crazy bias, 19 watts and such. So if you have a cathode biased EL84 amp and it's biased so that it's idling between 12 and 14 watts, and it has at least 470 ohms on the grid, and the plate voltage does not exceed 340, almost any good tube will work, including the humble JJ. If any of those conditions are out the window, so are any predictions of tube longevity, and they will kill a Brimar or a Mullard or a Bugle Boy just the same as they'll kill a JJ or a TAD. Hey, David S. in Newfoundland. Jim Steffs. Holy Marshall's Batman. Thanks, Scott. Excalibur 15s I'm working on, David S. I'm trying to find some things to allow me to make them. I was really, at the time, and sometimes now when I think about it, I felt kind of stabbed in the back by the guy who was making my faceplates for me. Because not only did he stop suddenly, and it wasn't just me, he got out of the game, but the last batch I got from him, which was supposed to be enough for me to build about 5 amps, which would have given me time, were seriously flawed, unusable. And I've not been able to find someone else who does that service. I need to talk to Kyle Rhodes. I'm going to reach out to Kyle Rhodes and see if he has options that would let me proceed, and a few other guys in the industry. But I've had so many irons in the fire. It's really hard to do that. I had everything planned out for the Excalibur, and then COVID happened, and all the supply chain was disrupted. So I've got to reinvent my own personal wheel in a lot of ways to get pricing and parts availability and stuff. Hey, Marcus. He asks, will adding an effects loop to a 4-input Marshall JTM45 Plexi type cause issues? If you do it right, no, it'll be transparent. And you can use the Metro loop. You can use the quite excellent sounding loop that Jason at Headfirst sells. They're all very similar variations on the same L&D 150. It may not always be musically useful to have an effects loop in a Marshall JTM 45 or 1987 because, and see the discussion I had with David Friedman first Saturday of October, where we discuss this very issue. But it won't hurt the sound of the JTM 45 or the 1987 or the 1959 or the Super Bass or whatever. But it may not give you all the benefits that you're looking for. So see that discussion Dave and I had on that. In general, everything is a compromise. Everything is a compromise. But an effects loop is the kind of compromise which often works best if the effects loop is preceding a very clean output stage. And the amp's distortion and overdrive characteristics come solely or primarily to a very large degree from the preamp rather than the phase inverter and output section. Darren Farrell, greetings from Ireland. Greetings right back at you, mate. He's replaced his 65 reissue Princeton for a special edition 65 Deluxe reissue with a P12Q. Those are nice. Yeah, the P12Q is a very good sounding speaker. It's a little bit bright, maybe the first year. But, people have taken issue with my criticisms of the C12K that Jensen puts in Deluxes. But no one who's heard a C12K next to other speakers likes the C12K anymore. Good compared to what is the issue? And if that's the only speaker someone has, they probably think it's great. And how dare this person disparage their favorite speaker sample size of 1? P12Q is a good choice. It has its own strengths and weaknesses. In general, with the Deluxe Reverb, you want something that's either a fairly neutral, efficient speaker, such as an ET65 or a Vintage 30 or a Creamback 65, Alessandro Eminence, or the various, Texas Heat things and Swamp things. Well, they all have their own color, but you're not going to get a lot of breakup out of the speaker, out of a Deluxe Reverb. Or you go the other direction for Alnico, or a low efficiency speaker, P12Q, like you have, or even a Celestion Alnico Blue or Alnico Gold. It really depends on your playing style and choices. The way I explained to most guys in town playing Deluxe Reverbs, I say, is your ultimate Fender clean like Stevie Ray Vaughan Little Wing, or is it like Robin Ford, or do you want to do Chicago blues, like true stuff? Howlin' Wolf with all that stuff out in chess, and part of that's going to be old ribbon mics and distorted clipping, low bandwidth tape machines and stuff too. But if you were in the room with Hubert Sumlin in 1957, so the P12Q is a little bit closer towards the Hubert Sumlin end of things, but not as much as you would get from a really kind of on the ragged edge Alnico speaker. The ET65 or Creamback 65 with the Deluxe Reverb gives kind of the Robin Ford thing. And for the Stevie Ray Vaughan Little Wing Riviera Paradise kind of cleans, I really like the G12C by Warehouse with those. But, the P12Q is a good choice, and if you like it, that's great. There's Avatar Speakers has got Avatar 50 that people really liked. I did a shootout video on Deluxe Reverbs with a lot of contenders, and people really liked that Avatar 50. I felt that the Avatar 50 was kind of very much a character speaker, which is, again, kind of, is it a jack of all trades, or does it do one specific thing very well? That's another one worth looking into, though. Hey, Ryan and Jacqueline. Let's see. He made the uncharacteristically stupid mistake of plugging a Fender head into the speaker ohm output of another combo amp, which was off. I think everything is fine, but what should I check for? Well, it's unlikely that you damaged anything. If you did, one or the other output transformer would have been unhappy, which might have translated into unhappy tubes. But if both amps sound fine to you, odds are both amps are fine to you. Don't do that again, though. The real issue is when you... I've had guys do the same thing, but they go into the effects return on an old PV solid state amp by mistake, and really bad things happen then. Hey, Eddie Leaguer. Yeah, tight hardware is something that people overlook. Is all the hardware tight? All the hardware that the user can, realistically access and check. If it's not tight, you're saving yourself maintenance and problems down the road. Are all the fuses the correct rating? Not just the value, but also whether they're fast blow or slow blow. And if you are gigging, do you have spare fuses? Are you sure you do? Do you know where they are? it's not a bad idea to have a little tackle box with you for gigs, even if you keep it in the car most of the time. Yeah, Jeff. Everyone send love out to Keith at 5 Watt World. David S. asks, "Am I still using MOD caps?" Yeah, I'm using the electrolytics. In fact, I've got a bag of some 20 microfarads here that I've not put into the. There, let me let it focus. That I've not put into the actual storage bins back there on the wall yet. I've got a lot more storage than that. I've got racks and racks and racks of it, but that's the little bin up on the wall that I use for my most commonly, the stuff I use all the time. Like the top is all the resistors found in Marshalls and Voxes and Fenders, and down below are things like 20 microfarad electrolytic caps, 47 microfarad, 100 microfarad, etc. I've had no problems with them. I out of hundreds, I had one that came in that looked like it might have a little bit of leaky diode, not diode, a little leaky electrolytic at one end, brand new. I just tossed it. I didn't even check it out. Hey, Alex, Serious Amplification. I need to get you on one of these with us someday, brother. I'm always hesitant to reach out to Australians because I live stream at 4 or 5 in the morning your time? I could look it up, but I'd rather just make up a number out of the blue. It's interesting to me that I have met so many Australians from doing this. You and Brad and Jason and Chris and Leon Todd and one of my good friends I was talking to yesterday is an Australian transplant living in Brooklyn, Andy Sishan, who thumped the bass for Billy Joel. It's a small world after all, and none of us need to hear that. And I wish I hadn't said those words. Let's see, Butcher Pete. He's looking to start designing amp PCBs after years of doing pedal PCBs. Ooh, any recommendations on books, websites, etc., where I can read up on designing PCB for amps, specifically any advice? I don't know about books and websites because. What's the best way to put this? When you read up on amplifier design, so the Merlin Blenko books, you learn to say, all right, this circuit would normally draw X current, and here's how you do the math for that, but you need to figure there's a startup surge, so the current may be as high as this. And if something were to go wrong, this would be the minimum current capability we would want for this part of the circuit. And then you learn that translates, okay, that's going to be a total length of about 14 inches. Okay, well then that means I need to use at least 20 gauge, 18 would be better. Or it's only that long, I could actually use 22 gauge for that. Well, there are conversion tables that tell you that if, the same way you can look up the current capability of wire, stranded wire or solid wire of X gauge and Y length, there are also charts that you can look up to see, all right, I need to have at least, 0.5 millimeter trace on a 2-ounce board to handle that current. But if I have room for it, I'm going to go ahead and make twice that. So you need to know where on the board you are going to have X, Y, and Z amounts of current and what each trace width needs to be given a given thickness of copper. And that also can correlate into the diameter of the pad necessary. And then you have to look at, what is the minimum spacing between traces that I can get away with? Let me try to double that. That still looks pretty narrow. I don't want any electrons arcing over from one to the next. So you have to approach PCB the same way you do a wired layout. You're just fixing a wired layout in place. So it all comes down to current. So you need to know what the current of the circuit is under normal operating conditions, under startup conditions, and under failure conditions. Because hey, it's one thing to say this thing should always work, but if a screen grid shorts to in that power tube, all of a sudden this part of the board is going to char. No, you don't want to do that. So you may say, well, To prevent that, I will put a fusible resistor as a bridge here. So instead of doing a via or a bare jumper wire, I may choose to use a 200 ohm fusible resistor that in normal circumstances will never fail. But if something goes catastrophically wrong, it'll burn, and it'll burn open, but there won't be any flames. It's flame proof, and it's up off the board, so there'll be no damage to the board, and it'll protect all subsequent traces. So it all boils down to Ohm's law, really. Ohm's law and general principles of this is the current, this is the voltage, this is the voltage, the insulative quality of this material applies up to X voltage, etc. And then you apply that to a PCB the same way you do with wires and turrets. I know nothing about no Marshalls, K. Michael P. down there in Sebastian, Florida, but I'm going to learn soon. Yeah. You know, it's on the one hand, I don't have anything to learn about the lead or major circuit. On the other hand, in every amp, I'm always learning things. Even if it's, I've always done it this way. This better way just occurred to me. You know, I'm not quite done yet, but I go in with a lot of confidence these days. Let's put it that way. Yeah, Watford Valves has some good stuff there, Human Flies. Randy Steffs, he asked, what about buying tubes from Electro-Harmonics directly? Well, that'd be buying from New Sensor, which is the parent distributor, and they're going to want large minimum quantities for you to order directly from them, most likely. You also don't get anyone doing a subsequent QA sorting of the tubes if you buy from the manufacturer like that. New Sensor's QA is not particularly great. If you go to the tube store, you go to Tube Depot, Eurotubes, Magic Tubes, etc., there's someone there whose livelihood and hangs on their reputation. And so they may get in 2,000 JJ tubes, and they'll test them. And, hey, these 800 I can sell. These 200 I'm sending back. They're not up to the right standard. But those have to be sold to someone somewhere. Hey, Robert, I don't have any plans to. Amps that are featured on the channel are 99% amps that have been brought to me for service. So if someone has a Tone King Ironman 2 and wants me to service it, I'll be glad to. That said, it's a brand new model, should be under warranty, should probably be 2 years before anyone would bring it to me. If someone has one that they'd like to have me go through on the channel, I'd be glad to. Occasionally I'll reach out and I'll borrow a Sir or a Friedman just to show on the channel, but that's pretty rare. I like to feature amps and show how they're built whenever possible. So if anyone out there either has the Ironman 2 or if anyone at BAD is still speaking to me after some of the things I've said about what's that awful one? Well, maybe I shouldn't even finish that sentence. Anyway, I put the Tone King Sky King kind of through the ringer, but came out with a happy ending with a new board. But the Morgan PR20 or PR30, whatever it's called, I don't think I'm anyone's favorite at BAD. Good. And did I say grids? I might have said just grids. I don't recall. I would have been thinking screen grids in my head. Sorry. Yeah, at least 470 ohms on the screen grids on the screen on pin 9 of the EL84s. Sorry. There's what I have in my head and the words that come out of my mouth, and sometimes they don't quite match. In the video, I'll put a little text up and say, "Dumbass meant to say blah blah blah." But live like this, ain't no net. Well, Joe McGraw, send me your guy's information. I'll contact him. It's a little bit more than laser etching, but I'll see if maybe that's something he could do. Thank you. Hey, DDC 441, and hello, Josh Roberts. I have no experience with Rev's lunchbox amps. I've not had any experience with any Rev amps at all. I need to reach out to RJ Schmerler, who said he's got a buddy at Rev. I want to see if Rev would be interested in sending me something to review. I'd love, here's the thing, and I've talked to some other amp companies, and I got one that may be following through on this. I would love for people to send me amps for review. Just, I would send the amp back. I don't want it for free. I don't want anything for free. But if you send me one of your amps and you're confident that it can hold up to the same scrutiny that I've given the Sir, that I've given the Friedmans, that I've given the Top Hat, that I've given the Swart, all those came out of those review processes very, very well. That even I've been able to give to quite a few Dr. Z's, the non-reverb ones. So if you've got an amp company out there and you want the world to know that your amp is really well built, I'm as persnickety a curmudgeon as you're ever going to find, and I put them all to the test. So if you want to send me an amp, Rev, if any other companies out there want to send me an amp to be featured on the channel, I will send it back to you. I will not ask to be paid, but I will also tell the world what's inside it. And that can be a very good thing, see the companies I mentioned before, or a very bad thing, and see BAD not wanting to talk to me most likely. Yeah, Travis Elmore Customs says he really likes the P12Q once it's broken in. It's a great sounding speaker. I agree with that. It just takes a long time to break in generally, in a deluxe reverb especially. The P10Qs take about a year, and a super reverb, that's quite a lot there. It's just, they can eventually be fantastic. They're not bad out of the box. They're just a little bit bright. David S., no experience with Milkman amps. I need to get a pull-down thing. I've got these pull-down things I sometimes remember to do like this. I need to have a pull-down saying, nope, have not tried a Milkman yet. I need a pull-down that says, don't buy the 64 custom hand-wired Fender Deluxe Reverb or Princeton. And Tyler amps are a travesty. I've had two come in, both sold as hand-built in America. One of them was hand-built in America using Chinese parts. It was a Weber kit. Everything in a Weber amp kit is the cheapest of the cheap, and Tyler used all their cheap stuff, and whoever at Tyler built that had no business building that and selling it to the public. It was one of the worst kit builds I'd ever seen in my life. The next Tyler, which belonged to the same owner, was a Seriatone that said Tyler on it. And so all Tyler was doing was having Seriatone make them amps, Princeton's basically, which had Tyler on the front label instead of Seriatone. It was the exact same amp you get from Seriatone or Cherrytone. Difference being that there was an upcharge for it to say Tyler, and Tyler's website is full of everything handmade in America, made in America, USA, go Patriots, and a whole bunch of Bible stuff, religious quotes. So they're like clinging to God and country. Meanwhile, they're lying their asses off. They're just lying to people. Their amps are not made in America. They're not made with American parts. And the only worker at Tyler is a person badly assembling a kit that should never have been sold to a human. So avoid Tyler. They're garbage. They got a good reputation in the worship band community for a while. I don't know why. I guess if you never turn your amp up because you're playing U2 copies at church real quiet, no one's going to hear the buzz. That sounds mean. I don't mean to attack worship bands. There's a genericness to a lot of worship bands that doesn't appeal to me. The same way I don't like Coldplay. So I'm not attacking churches. I'm attacking Coldplay, and some of the church bands just happen to sound a lot like Coldplay. It's probably not their fault. Anyway, I've just lost a whole bunch of viewers. That's okay. But Tyler amps, at the very least, they're wrong about everything that they think that they're doing. A backup kit for many different amps. Oh, if you're gigging, you need to have fuses, you need to have a flashlight, you need to have a spare power cable. If it's a detachable IC, you need to have a spare instrument cable or three. You need to have batteries. If your pedals take batteries, you need to have fuses and maybe 2 or 3 12AX7s. If a power tube goes out on a gig, that's not the time to change a power tube, but preamp tubes can be. Um, you know, and used to be that you'd. I won't even go there. Other things musicians might carry with them. Anyway, but it really depends on what amps you have. Hey, Valdi Bergeson from Iceland. I've shown quite a bit. Look at my channel. I don't remember if it was a 56 or 58 deluxe reverb, not deluxe reverb, Tweed Deluxe 5E3. There's a 58 or 56 on my channel where I show ways to tighten up the lows on 5E3s. I've already done that in like a 2-hour format, including a great playing video by Logan. So I don't need to repeat it here, but look for that. I've got vintage Fender playlist. I've got a vintage Fender playlist on the channel, or you can just search Deluxe or search 5E3. I think 5E3 would be in the title. Hey, Ryan, no problem. He asked if I'm getting speaker buzz as a note held is decaying, and I proved it's not the amp with a known good cab. Is that a sign of these vintage speakers failing? It's either a sign that the speakers are problematic. You could have a rubbing voice coil or a tear in the cone or separation in the surround. Pardon me. But it's also possible that there's something, if it's a combo amp, that there could be a bad tube or solder joint in the combo that does not exhibit if you use an external cab, because the components in the combo amp are not vibrating if the speaker in the combo is not vibrating. So the best way to test that would be to play, if you're testing the speakers in a combo, is to play some other combo's output into that combo's speakers. And if the speaker buzz stays with the combo being tested, it's probably the speakers. Hey, Sergio. Obrigado. Hey, Nick Sarah. He asked, have I ever messed with changing the heater wire scheme on a champ to help with hum? Yeah. Why is it my mother texts me during this? A, even though I beg her not to text me while I'm doing these things. It's about gardening stuff. It's not an emergency. B, how is it that text came through when I turned all that stuff off on my devices? I thought, okay, let's try. No, I have to have the Wi-Fi on for this. It's getting through the Wi-Fi. I love my mother, but she just does not understand that people can work on Saturdays. Anyway, yeah, I often rewire champ wiring grounding schemes to be bipolar rather than unipolar, where one side is just at chassis. It's not always necessary, but it can be beneficial. If I were building a champ from scratch, I certainly would wire both sides of the heater independently with an artificial center tap. But if it's like a very valuable 1956 champ or whatever, I won't change it unless there's something drastically noisy in the amp. I've not tried the Mojotone can caps. I would need to call the guys and ask them who's making them for them, but I've not tried them. As far as can caps go, I like F&Ts. I will sometimes grudgingly use a JJ or a CE. I will reach out to the Mojotone guys and see what they've got. I had one Mojotone can cap in an amp here the other week that did not make the channel, and it was a 3-section. I think each section was 20 microfarad, 500 volts, and the amp had not blown up. So that's one promising thing. Hey, Modern Obstacle, the wait list for doing a CC2 is going to be the beginning of the next year. And I prefer to have, if someone's within driving distance, driving is great because it can't be lost in shipping and stuff, in which case you can send the entire amp. But if it's too far for someone to drive, I prefer to receive the chassis without the entire cabinet, because the cabinet is 80 pounds and very large, and the chassis is 25 pounds and much, much smaller, and hence cheaper and safer to ship. Hey, Rocker534, I talked about the best EL84s earlier. Let me see if they're still in stock. I also talked about why the best is not always necessary. Let's see here. Because there are other factors in the amp which can make even the best EL84 die. Let's see. Why is that so large all of a sudden? I'll make that small again. There is a preferred series 7189 that I really like from the tube store. And before the COVID series hit, they were about $15 each. Then they went up to $27 each. And now they are $47.95 each. So while they are really nice EL84s and perhaps worth it to you, they cost as much as a really good EL34 now. So that's the preferred series 7189 at thetubestore.com. And they are great, but, it's an awful lot to spend on EL84s unless you have a lot of money. And a single pothole can cost you $50. Hey, Brendan Gauntner, I don't keep up with all the 5-watt amps on the market. I can tell you that the current production AC4 is garbage, but I don't know what else out there really exists. I'm sorry, I can't help you more than that, because I just don't keep up with that end of the market. For two reasons. Number one, I have no personal interest in an amp that small and quiet. Number two, the amps in that range typically are so inexpensive that they would never be brought to me for repair, so I have no professional need to keep up with them. I'm sure someone out there is making an awesome little single-ended EL84 amp, but if so, I am unfamiliar with it. Sorry. Hey, Jim Mack says, Valdi, I just finished that kit, the Mojo Tone kit. He's recommending a turret board or eyelet board from Hoffman Amps to replace the fiber board. And Rob R. has an improved ground scheme. Rob Robinette's improved ground scheme is from me. That's my ground scheme. I put it up. Rob stole my ground scheme with my permission. I've got a little turret board here for making a 5E3. And you can get this at CE Distribution for about $11. If you're not a member of CE Distribution, if you have to have a business license, tubesandmore.com, probably like $14. Same business, just a retail outlet for it. I would do one of these over the Mojo Tone fiber board, because I spent an hour last night soaking that 72 Deluxe Reverb's old fiber board in isopropyl, following with a heat gun to get DC out of it, and this should never have leaky DC. Hey SS, I have never worked on a Quilter amp or an Aviator So as far as I know, there's little solid state things. That's the extent of my knowledge of them. Some people really like them. I played one once and I thought it was okay. But that was, I don't know what the model was. It was 10 years ago. So they might have gotten amazing since then. But it's just a segment of the market I've never been interested in. I don't keep up with 7-string drop C active pickups either. It's just not my world. If a client needed me to learn that, I'd learn that in about 2 days and be up to speed. But unless I'm paid to, I just can't care about the gent stuff. And I just personally have no interest in quilters. Bluesman says, I want to thank you for turning me on to the Freeman Runt. It's fantastic. I'm very glad I was able to introduce you to a good product. Dave makes good stuff, and the Runt is particularly good value for money, whether the 20 or the 50. Different Freemans I've played, I've liked to varying degrees. Not all of them have been the sound that I prefer, but that's why we have so many flavors of ice cream. In the same way, when I've finished these two actual desirable Marshalls, 74 and 68, on paper, this 68 Smooth Telex Major is worth a lot more than a 74 lead. Other people are going to like this one's sound better, and they're going to sound very different from each other. And that's what makes this whole thing fun. And that's why it's also fine if you love playing a 7-string drop C chugga chugga into a quilter, because it's not about me imposing my taste on the world. I'm just here to let you know, hey, that amp that you like the sound of is going to rob you and catch on fire. I try to keep my only give my objective opinions any weight in here. The subjective stuff comes out because I'm human and I like to. It's a conversation. So let's see, Natas Satana. What impedance speaker would you use if the guitar combo output, if the amp has output options for 4, 8, and 16 ohms? Just swap the 16 ohm V type on my DSL4. Okay. You're going to get the ET65 there sounds better than the V type. So you're hearing a difference in the speaker and the material, etc., and the speaker design, not a difference in the impedance. In general, if you have a combo which has a 4, 8, and 16 ohm taps, I would want to use 16 ohms for the internal speakers. That meant I could use the internal speakers and external speakers at the same time using 8 ohms. Or if you have a combo like you have and you already have a great sounding 8 ohm cab, then I would make sure that the internal load of the combo speakers would also be 8 ohms. So then I could use the internal and external in parallel at 4 ohms. So it's not about whether I want to have 8 ohm or 16 ohm is going to sound best in that combo. You're not going to hear a difference between an 8 ohm ET65 and a 16 ohm ET65. The issue is if you want to expand your rig, use internal and external speakers at the same time. You just got to plan ahead for that. Hope that makes sense. Let's see. Frank Francis says he's got a Marshall 5050 power amp here, lighting up both screen grids on one side, and the bias want to adjust high enough to calm it down. I'm not sure what you mean by it's lighting up both screen grids. I mean the resistors are burning. I doubt that the bias. I doubt that the rectifier in the bias supply is given up. I imagine you have some other major problem in there. Don't turn it on with output tubes in place until you can get that sorted out. Any good tech can find that in about 10 minutes. It's very possible that you had leaky DC on the coupling caps of the output of the phase inverter, which can absolutely nuke a bias supply. So instead of having negative 42 volts on the bias going to the grid, all of a sudden you have negative 12 volts or even a positive voltage is possible. So I would say that that is not the kind of situation to ask a guy somewhere else in the world about. Power the amp off, take the tubes out, bring it to a good tech. 50/50 power amp's got a lot of voltage and is potentially worth something. So get that taken care of. It could be a very inexpensive repair. You could be looking at 2 Mallory 150Ms and 3 5-cent resistors and have a healthy amp again. But if you let that go, you at the very least you're going to burn through expensive power tubes. Hey, Kunkmeister. I talked about this before a lot. It's a small company. They have employees. Employees need health care. They have a building. The building needs plumbing and electricity and internet. And they have to market the amps, so they have to buy a lot of cardboard. And they have to hire people to design things to put on the cardboard. And they're not selling as many amps a year as Fender or Marshall or Vox or Blackstar. So when you do something really well on a small scale, things cost more. Beyond that, they're very good amps, and I think that the market has so much imported landfill design stuff on it that people's sense of what things cost is artificially low. And I think Two Rocks are not particularly expensive for what you get, but you get what you pay for. And if 10 times as many people bought Two Rocks a year as do now, then their prices could come down and they could get better deals with their distributors and stuff. And maybe they could negotiate better shipping costs with FedEx or whoever they use. There are all these factors that people don't take into account. You could sit down and say, oh, okay, I counted up and all the parts in a Two Rock come to $1,400. No, because they're having transformers made to their own spec and stuff. So why is it $1,400 worth of parts and they charging $4,000 for it? Well, it has to be a profit, and what the price you pay has a dealer's markup as well. So the dealer's got to have some money in that. If the parts cost $1,400 and they sell it to you for $1,400, then why on earth did they spend the time making the amp? And a lot of people need to get paid along the way. Sorry, it's a sore subject for me because I could see myself getting in that position someday. Hey, Rocker 534, don't apologize for participating and being interested both in amplifiers and music and in my little corner of that. I have no experience with Cornford amps. I've heard great things about them. I certainly like the sounds that Paul Stafford Cook gets from his. And I've heard Guthrie Govan, I think, gets some fantastic sounds. Sorry, for some reason I saw his image in my head before I could think of his name, and I was going like, Jesus Christ Superstar? No. Anyway. Hey, Tristan Schmuckley. Oh, man, I don't mean to bust your bubble. He's asking whether you can make an amp out of an old Hot Rod DeVille cabinet, chassis. You can. You absolutely can. Is it worth it? No, because the openings for the tubes to pass through in the preamp are much larger than a preamp socket fits in. You've got to do metal work to make something fit. It's not that great sounding a cabinet. It's brand new chassis designed to make a Marshall out of. Cost $60-$80. You can buy a really nice looking head cab or a combo for a Marshall style build from Mojotone for $300-$400. If you want to, if someone said, can you pretty please make this Hot Rod DeVille into a Marshall? Yeah, I could take everything out and find a way, but I have to have adapter plates to take the 1-inch openings for the preamp tubes down to the 3/4 inch openings and stuff. It's a pain in the butt, and it's a lot of work to get back to where you would have been if you just spent $60 to get a new chassis. My bandmate has a Music Man 65-watt hybrid head that runs around 700 volts, says Butcher Pete. Any wrecks on EL84s or equivalents that don't mind the high voltage? I can't imagine that there's an amp which has 700 volts B plus with EL84s. That's over twice what they're rated for. Let's see, Music Man's 65-watt hybrid. I mean, shouldn't they? Be 6 L6s or 5881. I mean, not 5881, sorry. KT88s or something? 6550s? EL34s. Okay, yeah, I imagine it's probably EL34s, which is very different than EL84s. Second. I don't. I'm not a big fan of extremely high plate voltage, but there are EL84s that can handle it. The main killer of those is going to be too high a screen rather than too high a plate. Hey, Chris R. Yeah, I've had experience with Tyler amps. See, earlier in the chat, I probably pissed off a bunch of people in my answer with it, but avoid Tylers like the plague that they are. I'd have to see what Uncle Doug's doing and if there's anything else in there. Screen grids can be good even if they're not necessary. Yeah, I think when you have a resistor instead of a choke, the argument is that the dropping resistor serves as the screen grid resistor for both tubes, and that's true. But if you have one EL84 6L6 in this case with Doug versus 6V6, if one 6L6 dies, you can take out not only the other tube if you don't have individual screen grid resistors, but you can take out the filter cap or other part of the power section. Whereas if each output tube has an individual screen grid resistor and there's a massive problem, you're probably going to lose that one resistor and the rest of the amp circuitry and the other tube is unaffected. So to me, it's fairly inexpensive insurance just to give them separate screen grid resistors, even if Leo didn't. Leo didn't do a lot of things that I think he should have. He switched neutrals too. Yeah, I don't switch a neutral just because Leo did. He got an awful lot right, and as I say again and again in all the videos, but not everything. Okay, some of you guys, even Leland Berg, who's a veteran worship musician, he likes me even more. Thank you. None of this is. I never get into politics on this channel, and I don't get into religion on this channel, et cetera, or sports. Mostly because I just don't have any interest in sports, and I don't want to drive anyone away. But there's a lot of worship music that's no different than Muzak to me. And it has nothing to do with the sincerity of their belief. It's just boring. Hey, none your business, sorry. People come up with clever names, and then I botched them, like Kunstmeister earlier. I think the first time he popped up, for some reason, it just don't look right on the screen. I was saying Kunkmeister, Kunkmeister, and none your business. What are your thoughts on running EL84 plate voltages below 300 volts to extend tube life? It's fine if you want. Some of the old box AC10s and AC15s were at 300 or even as low as like 280. You will get longer tube life. You will get less volume, but not a huge amount. It all depends on the sound you want. As sound systems get better and more people have monitors and in-ears, then guitar amplifiers cease to primarily function, or can cease to primarily function as an amplifier, rather to become a tone shaper, a tone generator. So if the tone you want happens at 270 volts on the plate of an EL84, the EL84 datasheet loves you for it. I think the EL84 datasheet examples are given at 250 volts. Hey, Uboof TB, loves my work and would like to ship a couple amps to you. Is that possible? It is possible, but email me, info@sonicaudio.com. For those of you who have wondered, because people get confused, it is psionic. The P is silent. It's not silent. It is Greek. It kind of loosely means mental energy. It is a pun on sonic audio, because it made me giggle when I thought of it. And I thought it looked cool in print. And being the ultimate businessman that I am, I chose a name that people could not spell, neither could they pronounce it, but it's Psionic Audio. So info@psionicaudio.com, and I'll be glad to talk to you about it. Though it would probably be after Christmas, given what's coming in already. Well, good, Eric Filsinger. I'm glad that you got something in your Tyler is made in America, but the Tyler is not. Gardening in November. I don't know whether it was what about gardening it was. I just saw the text pop up on my iPad, and I saw that it was something gardens rather than I'm on fire, help, help, help. So I'm like, it can be addressed later. Joseph Camilleri asks, I find small speakers ruin small amps mainly. Agree? Thanks. I think that's an interesting question. I have a video up saying, what does your champ sound like? Hint, the speaker is lying to you. And I showed, I don't just remember which, I think it was a Vibra champ or a regular champ, like maybe a Silverface, late 60s. Anyway, I show what the 8-inch speaker sounds like versus the same amp run out into a 12-inch speaker, and it's just a night and day difference. And the amp sounds so pretty through the 12. And people have argued with me that, no, man, running through that big speaker just ruins everything they love about a champ. It's got to be that little 8-inch speaker. They like mids. They like mids. They don't like bass. They don't like highs. They like mids. So some people are going to say that running small amps through small speakers ruin them. Other people will love the sound of the small champ or AC4 through a big speaker and a larger cabinet. Myself, it's easy enough if the wattage is not too much for a speaker to say, yeah, I've got a 1x12 now, and I've got a 2x10 cabinet over there, and a 4x10 cabinet over there, and I've got a little 1x8 cabinet over there, and for different colors, I'll plug it into different things. I don't think it's good to say, this is good and this is bad, because you can have all these different toys and mix and match the proportions. All right. Dr. Z Mini Z is a great single-ended EL84 amp, Lauren Billington says. Though only out of production, it's only available used. All right. I bet that is a great one. I've not tried the Mini Z, but I'm sure it is good, and I'm sure it is not a mono price thing that will work for a year or two and then fail, and then you've got to get something else. It has been an hour. We are going to do the traditional 7-minute intermission. I'm going to get some more coffee, and I'll see you guys back in 7 minutes. I like supporting Keith 5-watt World, but I wish this thing were bigger. My regular cup is about that big, and feels better in the hand. That's what she said. All right, let's see. A couple of things before we get back into the questions. If anyone cared about the experiments I did last weekend trying to incorporate a Sennheiser E906 mic into the channel, I decided that I did not, in fact, care for that mic very much. I thought it did one or two things pretty well, but not anything that I couldn't do with the 57, just applying a little EQ to it. But I found that because of its supercardioid pattern, it had some really strange nulls on the side, and when you bring it in close to a speaker, some of the stuff from the edge of the cone was spilling over into the null and doing comb filtering nasty things. I found it really unpleasant on overdriven amps, unless it was moved sufficiently far back from the amp that you couldn't really blend it with the 57 for more of an attack thing, unless you just wanted to go in there and then time align everything in post. The arrival time differences were too great. So I've returned the E906, and Monday, hopefully, might be Tuesday, I'm expecting a Royer R10 to arrive, and I think I'm going to get very pleasing results with that. That'll be fun for those of us who care about this aspect of it. It's one thing for me to fix all these amps. For me to really show you what they sound like, there's always a little bit of artistic license in recording things, because you make creative choices. Nothing sounds like the amp does in the room. It just won't happen. And even if I recorded it so it sounds exactly like the amp in the room, it wouldn't sound like that in the room that you're listening in, and you would have to turn your playback system up to be, if I recorded at 95 dB, you'd have to listen back at 95 dB. So there's always things that we have to do, some of which are more useful than others. And I think the combination of the 57 and the Royer R10 should give consistently useful representations of what an amp sounds like. Hey, producer man 130, 130. Hey, producer man 10,030. There he is. What do you know about Fargan amps? I've only had one in, and I was particularly unimpressed because the entire board, it was an eyelet board build. It was a fairly standard Marshall clone, but the eyelet board in that amp was made of wood. It was like whatever the next level up from balsa is. It was a very lightweight, thin wood. And the wood had done two things which you can predict. It had become conductive, and it had singed in certain places where there was heat. And wood is a particularly bad insulator for things that are high voltage and current and heat, because as soon as the wood gets hot, it develops variations on carbon within its structures, and wood contains carbon. It is hard for me to think nice things about Fargan amps because of that experience, because what the hell? That's amp 101. You don't use actual natural wood for boards, but Fargan did. So, what am I to think about Fargan? I try not to. Hey, Matt Johnson, thanks very much. And sorry, when you gave me that super chat when I was talking with Chris, and you wanted to talk about New Orleans restaurants and stuff, I only had so much time with Chris Nix that last stream, but I would love to discuss New Orleans restaurants with you on here. You don't have to super chat for me to do that. He's recently binged some of my videos on old AC30s. Could you discuss what makes a JMI AC30 tone stack act differently from Marshall or Tweed treble middle bass tone stack? Well, it is similar in a lot of respects, other than three key aspects. Number one, the bass pot is wired backwards from what you might expect. Number two, it's got a 10 meg resistor from the wiper to ground on the base pot. Now, did I say 10 meg? 10K resistor, which changes the behavior of that a lot. And so it's kind of a mistake that they made that way, and that the mids change radically as you play the amp. I think these are all good things. It is an unusual sounding circuit. It can be very easy to get awful sounds out of it. There was a guy asking today about why his JMI was so bright. His tone circuit might be faulty, or he may just have the knobs set the way he's used to on a Fender or something, which can take your head off. It also has two 1 meg pots versus 250K, 250K, and then about 6.8K to 10K, as you'd find in a Fender, or 250K, 1 meg, 25K that you'd find in a Marshall. And so it has a lot less insertion loss due to the 1 megs versus the smaller value pots. So it has it loads the preceding stage less, and it's a cathode follow preceding stage. So it's really got quite a bit of gain that is not lost to the tone stack. Third of all is the what's the best way to put this? The plate of the stage preceding the tone stack in the top boost channel, the one that drives the volume pot, is only 470 picofarad with a 500K pot. So you're losing a lot of bass there. And then in the top boost circuit, the treble cap is only 47 picofarad. And the result means that there's a lot of bass there in that. So I'm not explaining this well at all. I'm really not explaining this well at all. It gets very complicated in how they interact, where frequencies are boosted and where frequencies excite harmonic content in that circuit. Anyway, if I were to prepare for this question with charts and schematics and drawings and stuff, I could get my point across better. It is not dissimilar to the Marshall tone stack in a lot of ways, but the ways in which it is dissimilar are kind of crazy. And then you factor that in with no negative feedback, and you get some different gain behavior, and you can really hear the treble getting crisp and overdriven, even if the sound is still what our ears perceive as clean. And that is a really vague answer that I'm not satisfied with. Maybe I'll do a video on it, and I can think about it and give you a better answer. I was trying to give you a long answer because you did the super chat, but I think I would need to prep for that to really get to the meat of it. Maybe something will occur to me that'll make it more clear, and I'll resume that. Randy Steff says he sold his quilter because it was never fun, and if you needed a repair and called them, they'd tell you to buy a new one. Well, that's not great. And from I'm Not There, another super chat, thank you very much. On a 68 Pro Reverb reissue video, you replaced a 47 ohm resistor on the phase inverter with a 100 ohm to clean up noise. It wasn't really cleaning up noise. I'll talk about that in a moment. Doesn't matter what wattage the resistor is. It's not a dumb question. It does not really matter. Half watt or is the minimum I would use. But you could use a quarter watt there, but a half watt is not much larger, costs the same, and gives you peace of mind. You can use any wattage above a half watt if you want, but there's no real benefit. The 47 ohm versus 100 ohm, that is the tail between the cathode resistor and ground in the phase inverter, and is also, or rather, the tail resistor and ground in the phase inverter, and also between the negative feedback resistor and ground. And so if you have 100 ohm, you're going to have a lot more negative feedback, which does give you a noise reduction in the amp versus 47 ohms. I also could have just moved the negative feedback tap from the 4 ohm to the 8 ohm tap on the output jacks, which is what I would probably do in the future. I'm not 100% thrilled with the choice that I made to do that because it led to this confusion, but I had already pulled the board, I was already in that area, and it made sense at the time. But next when it comes in, I'll just change the tap to the 8 ohm tap on from the 4 ohm on the output and get it right there. It's much easier to do without pulling the board. I had pulled that board up because it was the first one that came in. I wanted to see what they're doing underneath because there was some stuff on there that just did not make sense if I only viewed it from the top. So I had to see it from the bottom to know what they were doing in that. Hey, Todd Janney, you must have been late. This is a 74 lead, 50 watt, and this is a 68 major. Those will be those just came in literally 15 minutes before the chat started, and I look forward to opening them up and seeing what makes them tick or not tick, so to speak. Hey, Jim. He says, please consider allowing memberships and posting schematic markups as a benefit to membership. No secrets necessary, but improvements to stock basement schematics, etc. would be awesome. You know what, Jim? That's a really good idea. I thought about, the membership thing or the Patreon thing. I know that people would give me money, but I have not been able to figure out ways to give enhanced value to members or to Patreons. What could I give you? I mean, it seems like, hey, letting you see the video a day before everyone else is kind of a whole lot of nothing. And I don't have time to do, you see a channel where, hey, you want all the tabs to this in the backing track, you get that on my Patreon page. That's great. I don't do that. I wouldn't have time to generate that. But what you're talking about, I might be able to accommodate. Like, all right, here is the Fender 65 reissue schematic that everyone can access, and here are the ways that you can make it sound better and why, and here's the 68, and here's how the 68 differs from the 65, and these are the changes you need to make on the 68, or here's how to reduce buzz and noise in a AB165 basement without doing full-on mods. I think it's a really good idea, Jim, and I will consider it some more. Thank you. Adam Shaw asked, what amps sound good with a treble booster pedal? All of them. But historically, AC30s, Tweed Fenders, Tweeds like Plexi, but it does kind of work, whether it's a 583 Deluxe or a Harvard or a low power or high power Tweed Twin or a 5F6A Bassman. Those would all be great choices, as would a JTM 45. The only amps where you don't really need that are where the amps are really bright. Say if I were to plug into the high treble channel on the 74 lead by itself, a treble booster is not going to be pleasant into that 5 nanofarad bright cap. Same thing for a lot of JCM 800s. But pretty much any traditional amp, which is not as focused as the 69 and later Marshall lead circuit and super lead circuit is with that high treble with the 5 nanofarad cap. Treble boosters are fun to have, especially if the treble booster circuit is not a strict range master, but someone has gone in there and given you a variable high pass. So you can say, all right, instead of boosting everything above 700 hertz, I can turn that down to set the boost point at 300 hertz or 100 hertz. I think they're wonderful sounding things. Rumbling Groover says, "Hi, Lyle. My grandmother probably built that '74 Marshall behind you. I hope she did a good job." I hope she did a great job, and I'd like to know more about your grandmother. How long did she work at Marshall? What the things she's seen. I'd love to know more about that. That's awesome. Jimmy Mack says, "Lyle, your/Rob Robinette's 5E3 ground scheme really improved the noise level of my build. Thanks. I'm glad to help. And see, you don't even have to be a Patreon member for that. Wish I knew about the tubes and more turret board too. Yeah, all pre-built and ready to go. Well, I have one reservation about this board. Let's see. I'm trying to orient myself. Right here, they've got, so this is for the cathode output, and then these next three pairs of turrets are for the filter caps. So say 16 microfarad 450 volt cap right there. That turret's awfully close to it. I wish it had been a little more space there. I'm pretty sure I can make it work, but I don't like to have cap bodies that close to neighboring turrets. That tells me when I populate this, if I end up using this board, I think I probably will, but I'll populate this turret and wait for it to be cool before I populate that filter cap. I just don't want to have to bend the cap off to the side for clearance. I don't know if you can see that. I'm talking about this eyelet right here being really close to the cap, which should be going right here. And I'll have to put some mounting holes in it. That shouldn't be a problem. And because I am who I am, I might have to do some additional little holes for the wires to go through so they come up from the bottom, then over, and then wrap around the turrets, and then chamfer the new holes so that the wire doesn't get any nicks and cuts in it. But it's a nice starting point, and the price is great on these things. And I'm sure it's going to be just fine. T-Rock is a 100% California company, Matt Field says. They pay their employees a living wage with benefits. That's why they cost $4K plus. And I say good for them. Hell yes. We need more of that, please. SIRS do the same. SIRS also are not cheap. You get what you pay for. And if you want to have really good work coming out of your factory, treat your employees well, because whether they care or not makes a big difference. For instance, Rumbling Groover's grandmother, hopefully she was treated well by the people at Marshall. If not, I will see that she was dissatisfied. Hey, Fred, he says he's had Kendrick black frames in his 66 Super Reverb since the 90s, and they're decent. Is there a speaker you might recommend? I think the Kendricks sound really good. The black frame Kendricks sound really good. There was a blue squareback Alnico Eminence that Fender was using in the Bassman reissues around 1990 that are really good. I don't remember the model number. They're pretty hard to find. The best sounding speaker in the world for a Super Reverb is an old Chicago CTS 1.5-inch voice coil Alnico, like you would have found in the mid to late 60s Super Reverb. And if you can find them, you can have them recapped for like $80 each. That is the best sounding speaker that no one has touched. No one's made something with that proper 1.5-inch voice coil since. But the Kendricks really do sound very good. And for people who've wanted a really good sound without spending the money for Alnico, they've had really good results with the G10C from WGS. And the Weber 10A 125 is a really good choice as well. Sorry, it's hard to remember all these numbers. Frank, truth, man. Truth. Anthony Z, thanks for joining us, man. Unless you're in a different part of the world, in case you're Anthony Z. Welcome, and that means a lot to me. Thank you. Butcher Pete, EL34 is, a little bit different than 84s. Yeah, that's the 700 volts. You can get away with 700 volts on the plate of an EL34, but you can't get away with 700 or 685 volts on the screen. So some amps that do that will steal a page from the SVT and do a much lower, almost half voltage screen supply. So 700 volts on the plate, like closer to 350 on the screens. But some amp companies don't, in which case you can do a Zener diode trick where you can put like a 50 volt Zener on and like a 47 ohm 2 watt in series on the screen grid of a tube, and drop that voltage by the amount of the Zener. And that not only can protect a output tube, it can actually improve the sound for certain styles. It gives a nice response. You can Google the Zener trick screen grid tube for that. Let's see here. Yeah, I'm trying to remember. G-Ben says my Music Man came with the L34s. It was a workhorse, never had to change the power tubes. I'm trying to remember on the Music Men I've had what the screen situation was, because they had really high plates. The only issues I've ever encountered with Music Man amps from the 70s are electrolytics wearing out, which is no surprise. They're 40 plus years old, 50 years old at this point. And then the fiberboard where the bias stuff was mounted, same design that Leo did at Fender, and so it was a little black fiberboard, and it would bend and form into waves over the years, and all the horizontal solder joints would crack. So change out every electrolytic, reflow all those solder joints on that wafer fiberboard, and then rock solid amps. Sometimes you might need to change out a transistor just because of time, but no big deal. Rod McLeod says, is there a big difference between 63 and 65 super reverbs? Only price. 65 is the first year of CBS ownership. 63 is the first year the super reverbs existed. And so people are willing to pay more for a 63 example. They're typically going to be exactly the same amp with the exact same components put in place by the exact same workers, the exact same way. And they will sound, all other things considered, exactly the same. But the 63 is the first year of production, and it's pre-CBS. 65 is the first year of CBS. I will say that the overall, the Fender chassis around 65 were this beautiful nickel plating. I'm not sure what year they started, what year they stopped, but that is by far my favorite chassis from Fender, to get that really lustrous nickel plating in there. It just looks so good. Yeah, T777. Leo got it right the first time, except the first Esquires didn't have truss rods. They switched to neutral. They had polarity caps rather than grounded power cables. You know, the trick is to know what Leo did get right the first time and what he didn't. He got most other things right. But yeah, like not just the truss rods and the Esquire, but the entire tele control circuit with that neck fake bass sound on position 1. The position 2 is just the neck pickup, and then the bridge pickup. You know, so the 67 and later tele wiring is a lot better than what Leo did. But you know, like 3 people in the world like that stock number 1 neck with a cap position and an old tele. That is so kind of you, Emmett Otter, but I think that your 85 Crate G60 needs to stay with you. I don't think that needs to be subjected to the potential woes of travel. Thanks, Jacob M. Appreciate that. Hey, Anthony Z again. He got his first tube amp in the mail yesterday, a 59 Basement Limited Edition LTD. I read on forums that a 12AY7 in V1 will make it sound better at low volumes, but what are your thoughts? Well, a 12AY7 in V1 will make it sound like a 59 Bassman, which came with a 12AY7. But you can use a 12AY7 or a 12AX7 in V1 and see what you like the sound of. 12AX7 is going to have more gain. You also have less clean headroom, and it'll have a higher noise floor. Both sound fine. Basically, the primary difference between a 59 Bassman and a JTM 45, aside from output tubes and transformers, is that the 59 Bassman would have a 12AY, and the JTM 45 have a 12AX7, and the Bassman copied the JTM 45 copied the schematic for the Bassman, whereas the actual Bassmans that left the factory had some changes after the schematic was drawn up. So yours has the actual Bassman schematic rather than a JTM 45 schematic. Isn't that interesting? But you know, a 12AY7 is $25-$30. So is a 12X7. Try each, see what works for you. Both are safe for the amp. Both are correct. I prefer 12AY in a Bassman myself, or 5751, which will split the difference. And this is why none of us have money, because we hear about things like this and we have to try this $20 tube and this $30 tube and this $40 tube. There are real differences between them. Unlike differences between, say, a really good current production tube and a new old stock tube. Is there a difference? Yeah. Is there $200 worth of difference? No. But the difference between a 12AY, a 5751, and a 12X7 are very real, and the price difference is not great. So you don't get into the diminishing returns game there. Joseph Barajas says, best attenuator for super reverb or Bassman? I think attenuators, by and large, can be overkill. Because when you're attenuating the speaker level, there are heat issues. Heat turns into shorter component life and can cause failures. I think most people would be happier with a master volume in either than they think that they would. A really good speaker level attenuator, let's say the Fryette or the Sir or the Friedman, can give you fantastic results. They cost an awful lot of money. The attenuators which do not cost an awful lot of money tend not to sound very good. They can damage your amp, and they can have short lives because they're heat considerations that they don't really factor in. Versus a master volume, if it's done right, it may be everything has some tonal compromise, but there's no heat if it's done right, and it's inexpensive. Go back and listen. I've got some more videos coming on those Bassmans from a couple weeks ago with the master volumes. I've got Scott Wilcox is here to finish to do a video on, and I need to get that Rust Bucket back one for that video. And I also need to get paid for that. I need to call that guy. And I've got another one over there for Brian Lindsay to finish up. A super reverb or a Bassman with a good sounding master volume is a wonderful thing, and you really don't lose as much as you think to master volume as you would have with an attenuator. I think people who sell attenuators want you to have an attenuator. If I were to buy a speaker attenuator, I would not be looking at anything that costs less than the Sir, the Fryette, and the Friedman, because say I wanted to use it with this Marshall Major here, that costs as much as my car. I don't want that to die because I cheaped out on an attenuator. But both of these Marshalls are getting master volumes. Actually, this one has one. This one used to. They're both going to have much better master volumes because that's all that's really necessary for a lot of people. Hey, Stephen Burkett. Yeah, I've got supersonic video on the 60 and then just the one that says supersonic, and I know I've done the 20 watt or 22 watt version. The clean channel doesn't sound anything like a deluxe. Uh, I cannot stand the Fender Supersonic. It has all kinds of bad ideas. Hey, two channels sharing a tone stack. If in order to make one channel sound good, you have to move the knobs here, and you go to the other channel. It sounds terrible. You got to move the knobs back and forth. So there's no point in having two channels if you can't use them live concurrently. The build quality is terrible. The noise level's hideous between the effects loop and the noisy reverb. And a deluxe reverb does not need an effects loop. I'm doing a Shatner. A deluxe reverb does not need an effects loop. It's a clean amp. All your effects sound good in front of it. If you're turning it up and it's overdriven and you wish it were still clean, get a different amp. I would avoid all Fender Supersonics, no matter the number after that. Martin, there is no pee in my pool. Anthony Z, I just want you to know that no, a 12AY7 will not damage any of the resistors in V1 in the V1 position on your Bassman. I don't know why people would say that. AY7s and AX7s are interchangeable all day long. Joe Halliday, thanks very much. Hello, Sailor FX. Hello, mate. Do you have any experience with the Trainwreck rocket circuit? It appears to have a whopping 80 microfarad first filter stage. Is that excessive or does it add something? I do. No, it's fine. It lowers noise and hum, and gives stability. Starts giving the entire circuit a lot of stability, which it needs because it is an amp which would be inherently unstable and oscillating if there was not quite a bit of filtering. Notice that they're doing that without a tube rectifier. Train wrecks, when done right, are really wonderful things that not all players will benefit from. They are, it's all in the name. It is like riding a tiger. It's great, but don't expect to get off. If you slip, if you make a mistake, everyone will hear it. It'll come crashing down. And no grid stoppers typically. You got to roll off the volume when you're not playing. You got to be on your game, or you'll have shrieking feedback, Nightmare City. But if you're up to the task as a player, it's really good. But it's like if you get say you get old 911, a sports car with a very lightweight, with a lot of torque, tremendous horsepower, weird weight distribution, and a manual transmission, and then you've got a whole bunch of switchback roads up and down a mountain. Well, you can't think about what you're going to have for dinner. You can't think about that report that you need to turn in by Tuesday. You've got to be thinking, I am doing this. I am driving this vehicle with all these factors. And train wrecks are kind of like that, because otherwise you just end up in a ditch. But yeah, I do like them very much. And I think 80 microfarad is not excessive. Marshalls will often have 100 for the first. But you definitely need that filtering in a train wreck. Otherwise, you're going to have very unpleasant interaction between stages. Let's see. Jet City 20 watt. Yeah, the Jet Cities I think have ceramic tube sockets. It's not Beldine, it's Belton. Belton sockets are great, but they don't fit in all chassis because the opening necessary for a Belton octal socket is a little bit larger than the opening required from most tube sockets. So if it's not large enough, there's no need to drill out the chassis for that. There are other good quality sockets, including good quality ceramic sockets. The thing you want to watch out for is that an octal socket, it's got a hole in the middle, and it's got a keyway hole. Let's see. So here's the hole, and I can't really show this, can I? The keyway. You want to make sure that the keyway can only go in the tube in one place, because if the center hole is too large, the locator key on the tube base can go in any direction, even if it's only supposed to go in one. You need to make sure that socket cannot have the tube inserted in any orientation other than the proper one. And you also want to make sure that it's not a ceramic that cracks or a plastic that becomes conductive. Beltons are fantastic, but they're not always the best option for a given chassis opening. Well, good. I don't know Doug. I've not spoken to Doug. I respect Doug. I'm not going to argue with him, especially at third hand. And if I were to argue with him, I would call him and say, Doug, let's talk about this. But I don't think he's going to. I don't think he's going to do any harm by omitting screen grid resistors. I just think there's a little. You're giving up on some inexpensive protection for the circuit as a whole by not using them. Jatuka built a tube amp which sounds absolutely fantastic. Congratulations. Very touch responsive and transparent and rich sound. The problem was when I try to record and play back, the magic's gone. Any tips? $10,000 microphones? Well, I don't use $10,000 microphones, and I think I get pretty good recordings here. Dustin Thiessen here is certainly the right person to give you tips. But I would say if you have an SM57 and a mic stand and a mic cable and a good computer interface and a fairly basic computer with GarageBand or Ableton or something, you should be able to get really good recordings without using any EQ or anything. But it is not the tools, it's what you do with them. So you can have the 57 and all that. You could have what I have here with the 57 and SE8 and soon the R10 and a $3,000 MacBook and all. I've got a lot of stuff that you don't see here behind the scenes. I've got more than $10,000 invested into this channel here on making things look so pretty for everyone. But if you don't know what you're doing, you'll get lousy results. So I'm afraid we might be back to that practice. But Dustin Thiessen there is a pro engineer. He's a good resource to have on here for this kind of thing. Thanks, Shelby Holtzinger. Yeah. Hey, anytime I'm listed with Brad, I know I'm in good company. Well, Anthony Z, it's about he says I need to sell logo coffee mugs. I'm looking into things like that. I need to get a T-shirt from a certain vendor to make sure that the quality is there. I don't want, I've talked about this before. I don't want you guys to be able to buy a T-shirt or a mug or a hat that says Psionic Audio or whatever on it, or some funny little thing I put out there, and then for the T-shirt to fade and shrink and be that paper thin, or for the coffee cup not to be microwave safe, or the handle to fall off, or the hat to give you a rash. And there seem to be a lot of fly-by-night businesses where you do your YouTube channel merch to them, and they print it out and ship it and all that, and you get your little chunk of change, but they seem to be selling absolute garbage. And I don't need to make money off of selling people absolute garbage. That's one of the reasons I checked out the mug from Keith. It's a good quality mug, and it's gone through the dishwasher about 10 times, and the logo's still there. So that's good. I've not tested whether it's microwave safe because I don't microwave mugs. I have a Pyrex measuring cup. I microwave coffee in when necessary. I prefer to have it fresh brewed, but if I've got some already brewed and I don't want it to go to waste, I'll put them in the fridge and the microwave it the next day. I ain't that picky. I was just kind of kidding, but I do wish there was a larger size. This is a little bit small for my hand, but I've got big hands. And same thing for T-shirts. I want to make sure that the cotton's good quality and all that. So I'm looking into it, but I just want to make sure that it's good. Yeah, mic placement is more important than cost. Yeah, absolutely. It ain't what you do; it's the way that you do it. And Anthony Severino is also interested. He's got a JMI Vox AC36 and integral top boost. Yeah. Um, if I can get some good big coffee mugs, I'd be glad to. Hola, hola, Cheeto TV. Oh, the coffee fairy's coming. Coffee fairy's coming. Thank you, love. See, I love me some Keith Williams. I love me some 5 Watt Whirl, but that's a better cup. If it just had my logo on here, and I could make $1 million. Try that again. Hola from Mexico. Have you seen the Tone King Sky King hand wired? I have not in person, but I've seen pictures. Yeah, he's got some unusual construction methods. I love what Mark Bartel did and does. I have I don't want to throw the current Sky King under the bus, so to speak. It's a lot of bus discussion the last couple of weeks. I was very unimpressed with the Sky King as it first came to me, but the company has really stepped up in replacing those faulty boards and doing a much better job. I still don't think that the current version of the board is up to Mark Bartel's reputation, but I hope that they continue to get better and better. So I don't want to slag them because I can say anything I want. I'm not going to affect the fate of any company out there. I don't think anyone really cares what I think in the grand scheme of things. But I hope that they get better and better. But no, the Bartel era stuff is going to be infinitely better than the current stuff, and it's just true. I have not worked on a Vox AC 120, Joseph. Sorry. Christopher Sambuco, follow-up question to adding screen grid resistors to a Princeton reverb. Just add the 470 ohms at the sockets with the existing dropping resistor, or would you use smaller, maybe 100 ohm? Well, you got in a Princeton is what, a 1K? Yeah, it's a 1K resistor taking place of a choke. So yeah, I would use a 470 ohm or a 1K per tube, depending on the voltage being run. In a Princeton, no, you just I probably do 470 ohms per tube. But if the voltage of the amp were higher than a Princeton, and it sounds like what Doug's doing with 6L6s, it would have to be a higher voltage circuit. I might go as high as 1K per side, in addition to the 1K choke resistor. Hey, Randy, he says I should take a little more artistic license when recording. There's nothing wrong with a little tasteful reverb added in post. A signal chain list in the video description would be nice. Well, for the past 3 weeks, I've put a pretty full signal chain and total gear list description in the videos descriptions. I don't know if anyone's noticed. And I have added a little bit of reverb in post here and there for like short sections. And here's what it would sound like if you added a plate reverb. And then here's back to the dry. And people tend to prefer the dry. So, and also I'm not trying to say, hey, here's my new record. I'm trying to say, hey, I'm sitting here in the room with this 66 Marshall. This is what it sounds like in the room. And if the amp does not have reverb, flip side of that, as I've discussed, is a lot of people are very unused to hearing a dry mic, what an amp actually sounds like to a microphone. If you're a studio engineer and you hear a dry close mic 57 track, you're like, yeah, that sounds like a good amp. I know exactly what to do with that. that's one thing. But if you're a player and you're used to hearing everything either live in a room or in your record collection where everything's been mixed and mastered and EQ'd, it's a learning curve. And the learning curve for me is finding out the best way to present information to everyone. But yeah, I'm not averse to adding the occasional plate or even solo compression or something if it gets a point across, as long as I'm also showing without that. None Your Business says he lowered the plates in his AC30 Custom Classic 2 to around 300 volts using a Zener. Yeah, that's fine. Don't go too much there because you can get, you have to change the entire bias circuit. But a JMI era AC30 rather, is going to be about 320, 325 volts. So I don't think I would worry about getting it anywhere below 320, unless you want to. You can. Some of them would be 310, depending on the wall voltage. But 320 seems to be a nice sweet spot for AC30s. But if you like 300, you like it, that's fine. I don't think there's any point to getting it down to 270, but you can. The AC15, why does the AC15C1 use a shared 1.5K 22 microfarad cathode on V1? It does that because the actual AC30 does. The AC15C1 is not a AC15. It is a 15-watt version of the AC30, mostly. But if you look at an actual JMI AC15 circuit, it's very different with the vibrato channel and the EF86 channel and the choke before the output tube plates and stuff. But it's a very different amp. But the 15-watt version of the AC30, the AC15, shares the circuit pretty much with the JMI top boost / normal channel. And they shared a cathode there. So it is equivalent of having 3K 10 microfarad per channel. So you have a 3K 10 microfarad on one, you have a 3K microfarad, 10 microfarad on the other channel, or you just share the cathode, which is what Vox did, JMI did, 1.5K 22 microfarad. Sergio, I don't have any, I don't remember if I've ever heard of EC50, Laney, especially if it's something that he's had for over 20 years ago. So I can't speculate, but it can't be anything that complicated. Laney's are not pushing the technology anywhere. They're always a variation on things you've seen before. I'm seeing a couple of people relatively new to the channel asking questions more than once. I will get to as many questions as possible. If you ask it, I will either answer it or, for reasons unknown, I will skip it. But please don't ask it again and again. Hey, Brad. Oh, did you have a good night last night at the concert in Melbourne? Feeling like death warmed up. You need to go get some of that famous Melbourne coffee. I hear it's almost as good as the Perth coffee. See, everyone else is in real time together, and I'm catching up to you guys. Rod McLeod says, someone gave me a 50-watt Marshall JCM 800 lead series with a JCM 900 1960 cab. What do you think of that amp? I don't know. If it's the 2204, fantastic. Nothing wrong with the 2204, especially from the if it's from the 80s. If it's from the 80s, that's great. If it's a reissue, then you need to see Brad's Guitar Garage's video. Was it a week ago on a 1987, which has the same. I think it was last live stream he did on Thursday or Tuesday. He showed the heater issues on those amps where the heater trim pot dies. But if you have an 80s example, they're great. The only 80s JCM 800 I don't really care for is the split channel reverb. Yeah, bouillabaisse is too spicy for South Carolina, man. I mean, I know you got the black and redfish and all that, but yeah, I love Charleston. I love Charleston to death, but they tend to go subtle on the flavor compared to New Orleans. Yeah, galatoirs can be nice. I've not been to Redfish Grill. I'm not a huge seafood guy, and I've not tried cochon yet, but I look forward to trying it. Hey, Josh Roberts. He's got a 64 deluxe reverb. He found a 20 microfarad, 150 volt cap in the bias. The voltage rating is not too high. It's overkill. You don't need anything more than 100 volts or 63 volts is what I would do. I don't trust a 50 volt cap there. 63 or 100, I would generally like 100 just in case a resistor ahead of that were to have issues. But 150 volts is more than fine. And 20 microfarad, that's what they used originally. You might have some hum with the 20 microfarad. I would typically go with the 47 microfarad 100 volt. But if that Mallory is working, the Mallory is working. Soldering is always preferable if it's good soldering. I'm not a big fan on terminal blocks, even, or maybe even, I should say, especially on the speaker connections for old JMI Voxes. Soldering is just better. C-Math. I think I'm going to get to your C-Math's question in just a minute. I'm going to do I'm not there. Thank you for the super chat there. You're in Canada, right? I've got some good Canadian friends, as does Brad here. Some really good techs at different ends of Canada. So put in the chat where in Canada you are, even if you're in a few hundred kilometers from other techs. We can tell you which one would be worth driving to. So I'm going to take another 7-minute break, then we're going to come back to C-Math's question here, because it's a good one, and I've got some answers, but I need to take a leak. And it's been another fast hour. And Fabiano Bittencourt, cheers from Brazil. Obrigado. I love people are here from all over the world. That means everything to me, so I'm going to go away again. But we'll be back in 7 minutes. All right, I figured I'd cut that intermission short a little bit, get a few more questions answered. I appreciate everyone bearing with me. And I know I've seen some people in the comments saying, man, he takes all these intermissions, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, I do. I do. I think it's good for me to be able to get a cup of coffee and you take a leak, and for you guys to be able to go grab a sandwich if necessary or whatever, and it kind of relaxes the pace. But, you know, at the end of the day, I'm doing this for free for people. So, you know. Anyway, all right, let's see here. C Math. What makes the 90s Korg AC30 sonically... Pardon me. Coffee. What makes the 90s Korg AC30 sonically different than the later CC2X, which I'm struggling to like? If I can stop belching in front of everyone. Well, on the one hand, you have the CC2X, which was designed to be a very bright, clean amp with 100K plate resistors, R6 and R7 in that model, and a 330K in series with the volume pot on the normal channel. If you were to jumper that 330K resistor and not use the damn bright switch on the normal channel and replace the 100K R6 and R7 with 220K, you're going to have an amp which sounds and behaves a lot more like the AC30 that you're expecting. I've got, if you search Lyle Caldwell Mods AC30 Custom Classic, they're out there on the internet. You'll see a few other things to do. But it just gives the amp a little more compression, a little more overdrive, a little less brightness overall, and makes it sound more like what you're wanting. And when all those things are done, and I do a few other things, but the publicly available mods are enough to undo the main issues. And the effects loop of the CC2, there was a factory error where they used a 2.2 nanofarad cap instead of they used a 0.22 nanofarad, 0.22 microfarad cap, instead of a 2.2 microfarad cap. There's a typo, which means the effects loop loses low end. So if you change out that cap for a 2.2 microfarad or 4.7 or 10, you get all your low end back. It is a very good sounding amp that once those relatively minor things are done. The 90s Korg AC30 TB and TBX are a almost one-to-one copy of the actual JMI circuit. There's a mistake in the vibrato channel that doesn't really matter, but they also have ground loops built into the board. They've got terrible trace routing, which runs the input signal through the tremolo circuit, makes it for a very noisy thing. Really, really bad ground loops and really terrible quality tube sockets for the preamp tubes in the TBX. So it is a poorly done version, also with really terrible plastic standoffs. Is a really poorly done, deeply flawed reproduction of the actual JMI versus the Custom Classic, which is kind of the greatest hits of the JMI top boost normal channels done in such a way to please people who think that the Birds used AC30s. They did not. The new Custom series and the hand-wired series sound better than the TBX or the Custom Classic, and I think that the Custom series sounds just as close as the TBX, not the TBX, the hand-wired, for quite a bit less money, and I find it a more versatile amp with an effects loop and reverb and tremolo. I recommend to people who want an AC30 these days to get the Custom, the AC30C2X or AC15C1X, or the head version. I think they're fantastic amps. They can be made even better, which guys like myself do, but in stock form, they do that thing that they do, and I like them very much. As you can tell, I'm not as impressed with the TBX as other people, even though they are made in the UK, as were Triumph and MGs. Rockefeller is okay. The Bienville's much better. Matt Johnson, oysters, Bienville, or just grilled oysters in general. The Rockefeller is a little too green tasting. It's good. And the Thermidor, I find like spicy ketchup. I'm not a fan of Thermidor. The Rockefeller is good, but the Bienville with that cream sauce, that's the way to go. Commander's Palace is the way to is absolutely the place to go. Just know that you have to wear a jacket, jacket required. So bring one if you plan to go there. Phil Collins is not allowed. Talk about obscure geek references. Take that, Matt. I mean, not Matt. Sorry. I do know you guys apart. Brad, with your Huey Lewis reference the other day. Thank you, Burke himself. I would not put a clipping diode in a 2204. I don't like the Jose mods. If you must do it, I would probably do it on the cathode follower right before the tone stack, like Friedman does, and like a lot of people do. I would just make damn well sure that the Jose clipping diodes can be switched off. I find it makes the entire amp sound small. Yeah, it's got more distortion, but it sounds small to me. But that's purely subjective and aesthetic. I was listening to Leon Todd do one of his streams. Was that 2 nights ago? And I really like Leon, and I try to keep an ear to the ground and watch Leon's channel and watch John Nathan Cordy's channel to keep up with what's happening in the modeling world. But Leon does a lot of high gain hard rock metal stuff, and a lot of the sounds that he and his buds love, I don't care for. And it's not because I listen to Lawrence Welk or something, but I kind of max out at Tool. Rush and Tool are about as far down that road as I go, and some of the later Rush stuff I've found kind of mushy and indistinct, and the metal stuff today goes farther down that path. So that's not my thing, but if a client brings me an amp and that's what they want, I know how to do that thing. That's another reason I listen to guys like Leon or Kyle Bull or even Jason over at Head First, because he crosses over towards that, though he's a little bit more towards the Van Halen AC/DC end of the gain spectrum like I am. There's room for everyone at the table. But in general, if I were to do a clipping mod on a 2204, I would do it right before the tone stack off that cathode follower. But that's not the way I like to get gain out of a 2204. I find that to be small sounding. We tune to see. Yeah, you can get rid of the HT voltage divider. It's just a problem. It's a problem because if you, it's hard to talk about in this context, because I would want to have the schematic in front and say, all right, this condition is caused by X, but if you change this, then this other thing happens in the amp, and we've got to address that. So you can end up playing whack-a-mole for a while, and I would need to have like 20 minutes and a whole bunch of graphics prepared to really talk about that. You can also just change the filtering, put in a choke, and get rid of the ultralinear connections, and just do a standard screen supply if you want to. But yeah, that 30K dropping resistor, not only does it sometimes fail or desolder itself from getting hot, but they're really hard to find replacements of that are adequate. Nola rocks. I will always give New Orleans lots of love. I need to come to give you guys some love in person. Speaking of which, your 3 amps are done. We need to get those back to you. So call me after 4:30 today. Oh man, I cannot recommend Dat Dog for etouffee, especially not the best etouffee. Dat Dog on Frenchman Street is better than Dat Dog on Magazine, but I don't get etouffee. I cannot speak for the etouffee at a hot dog place. Dat Dog's cute. and it's inexpensive and quite good. But if you want etouffee, I would send you to Mandina's. Man, don't go to Bourbon Street unless you want to see women from Minnesota showing their 50-year-old tits. Bourbon Street is just it's like Disney World for alcoholics. It's everything I don't like about New Orleans in one place, and all the interesting stuff is around it. Frenchman Street is much better, which seems like you know that. Brennan's is good, a little overrated these days. Arnaud's, a lot of the stuff in the Quarter has gotten Disneyfied. I really like, trying to remember the name of the place, one of my favorite restaurants in the world, and it's gone because I've got people listening to what I say. Tujague's. I like Tujague's a lot. Yeah, Jason over Headfirst does great stuff on Jose Mods and all that. It doesn't rock my world, but I can do it. Meta cheese. A video explaining the signal flow from input to speaker. That would be a very large undertaking to really get it done right. I will consider it, but it's not the kind of thing that you just don't. That doesn't just pop out because you have to have an outline for yourself, or you go down so many side paths. It's so easy to get distracted. But yeah, it's a good concept for a video. Fred, I don't know what you mean with the orange. Oh, orange OR30. I thought you said orange or 30. Yeah, I had one in. It was pretty good. They're okay. Like all oranges, the pots are made of cheese and will break if you look at them twice. And they have set screw knobs on split shaft pots. And the graphics make sense to no one. But if you like the sound and you're careful of the knobs and pots, they're fine. Thanks, Joe. I'll look for that after this. I appreciate that. Well, Brad, we would totally pull you out of your misery, put you out of your misery. Okay, I think we've got a list of volunteers here. I'll be behind the nun with the baseball bat. There's a third time someone's asked a question about Tonking Sky Kings that I answered over an hour ago. So I think I'm way behind in the chat, which means I'm probably not going to get to all the questions today. I apologize. Richard Clark says he's had great results with the Tonking Iron Man attenuator. It's a reactive load, is reasonably priced. Is it causing extra heater damage? I do not know. I cannot speculate. I do not have one in front of me. I have not had experience with that. I would hope that it is fantastic. Hey, Nick Orr. Sorry. I get several hundred emails a day, both legitimate and extended warranties, and people wanting to partner with my channel so that I would sell bottled water ads and stuff. And people asking how to turn the Blues Junior into a Marshall, and it's hard for me to find all the good emails. So try again, and I will look for you. Sorry, man. I will specifically warn you not to get a Weber attenuator. They are not good quality, and just don't. Well, Gooden, let me tell a dirty secret to the world. I can have an amp that is buzzy and hissy and terrible when you're in the room with it, like a Supersonic 22. and then I mic it. And what I play is so far above the level of the noise that what you hear on the playback sounds okay. But that's how a microphone hears things. That's not how our ears hear things. A microphone will hear the stuff above X decibel, and everything below that kind of gets ignored. Our ears hear the whole thing at once. It's like our ears work like binoculars, so to speak. Like, hey, there's a noise there. I'll listen to that too. You can zoom in on the low-level stuff. Can you play music with a supersonic? Yeah. Can you even get good recordings with it? Yeah. But there's so many better choices out there that won't have the ticking time bomb heat issues and all the noise and all those strange design decisions. I just don't see the point of supporting a bad design just because it says Fender and the button says Vibrolux on it. When you change channels, it's not a Vibrolux. I have not worked on a Berman amp, Matt Johnson, sorry. Booma Benz, I am trying to get the Excalibur back in the game plan. It's just tough for issues of production issues I've discussed earlier. I will be hoping to have good news on that. Now Keith joins in after I change. Nikki brought me a new cup of coffee, so your 5-watt mug is in the kitchen for the next one, and I got a plain one here. Hello, Keith. I enjoyed your telly players who changed the world this morning, especially since you put my man Andy Summers up high. I will reach out to you. I also need to talk to you about our discussion of TrueFire. I've been meaning to get back in touch with you about that, but I don't want to take up all your time because I know how busy you are. So I would love that. Let's see. KTOFO Inc. says, what's the issue with the Victoria high-low power standby switch, and should I stop using it? Well, I've got that Victoria here, the Silver Sonic that came in day before yesterday, and I saw that it had that feature, but I've not played with it yet because the amp had those other issues that need to get addressed first, such as power tubes. It seemed just to be like a 2 or 3 watt resistor across the switch, which means it's just going to be limiting the voltage and current when it's in one position, but I've not measured it or heard it yet. I will find out, and I will report back. I'll be going more into that amp once I get the issue with the power tubes and speakers sorted out. And I'm also want to look a little bit more at that intensity pot that was not just noisy, but literally microphonic. I've not encountered that before. I didn't put it in the video the other day, but I did. It's just a 1 meg audio taper CTS pot. I did take that pot out and put in a different CTS 1 meg audio taper pot, just in case that first one, that microphonics, was the wiper bouncing off the track or something. The other pot's not exactly the same, so it's just a weirdness of the circuit. So I will get you more information on that when I have it, which won't be long. That is fantastic that Tone King is standing behind their customers and replacing the Sky King boards, which I'm sorry that they went into production with the board which had such flaws. And this is, Tone King touched a hot stove. Hopefully they won't have to do that ever again. But I'm glad that they're standing behind their customers. Hey, Stefan. He asked, would I ever mic my amp up front and rear? I've done that in the studio because you can get some interesting sounds as long as you get the alignment exactly right and flip the phase of one. But in the room that I do all the work here, there'd be that much distance between the rear mic and the wall. And so I'd be asking for standing wave issues. So I would not do that in this environment. But if I were in a larger studio space, yeah, that's a technique that can work well. I think more for clean sounds than for dirty sounds. So it's not an all-purpose thing, but that's the nice thing about being in a studio. You can have 8 mics on a rig and bring up different faders for different sections of the same song. But it is a good technique, but it is a technique that needs more space behind the amp to work. If I had that amp 8 feet out from the wall, so the rear mic option would be good, then I'd be 8 feet from the front. The amp would be where I'm sitting, and that just doesn't work in this room. Do you know of any unbreakable sub $400 amp, something that can do driven and jazz? Says Sonny. No. You can get some things which are either pretty good bets, like a 90s or early 2000s PV solid state amp. Be careful not to break any of the knobs because the pots are hard to replace. And always have a pretty good sounding range of sounds for that price. Or you could say, well, I'm going to spend $300, $350 and know that I may need to replace it every 5 years. But in the meantime, it's going to do what I need it to do and get a Boss Katana 50 and be happy. $400 is really not a lot of money in 2023. And it's hard to think of that, but $400 today is $250 like 3 years ago. So, it's hard. It's hard to keep up with inflation in one's mind, let alone in one's wallet. See you, Dustin. I have nothing but love for Uncle Doug too, Randy. I may disagree with Doug on some particulars, but it's not like, oh my God, this guy's out there doing this awful work. It's just differences of approach. It's shop talk. I don't know. I would use a 4-iron for that, or I don't know enough about golf to even go down with that analogy, but it's not like someone's wrong for doing it a different way. It's just there are things that we discuss amongst ourselves. Brad and I do some things different from each other, and he knows what an idiot he is for doing it the wrong way. I've told him that, but I'm not going to tell the rest of you guys that he's an idiot for doing it the wrong way. I just tell him. Ooh, Adam Shaw says, how would you like to see Marshall develop new production amps going forwards? Honestly, I would like them to do amps which are simpler, better built, that aren't promising 18 million things, and are doing 1 or 2 things very well. I would like to see no more 9mm pots. I'd like them to just stick with 16mm pots. I could dream that it'd be 24mm, but it's probably not going to happen. But if Friedman can bring a Runt 20 or a JJ Junior to market at $1,600, $1,800, whatever it is, then with Marshall's larger manufacturing facilities, they could bring that same amp or almost the exact same amp to market for $800. But they're not. They're just not. There's absolutely no reason that you could not. Why can't I go to the store right now and buy a PCB version of this 1974 1987? Why can't I go and buy a 20-watt version of this with maybe PCB and 6v6s for $800? I could design it. I could design it in 2 hours. Something ready to go into production in 2 hours. Might need a little more time to finalize the board layout and as far as where the how it attaches to the chassis and all that stuff. But because they've got a committee that says, well, that's great, but now we need to give it a clean channel, or that's great, but now we need to give it an effects loop, or what if we gave it a thing where it does something entirely different? No, stop. You've been doing that, and it keeps causing problems. It does this or that. Either you have three compromises in sound, or you have increases in complexity leads to increased odds of failure. And Marshall made the reputation off bone simple things that did one thing well. And that's what I would have Marshall do. I don't think Marshall needs to worry about having a clean amp. It's fine if Marshall knows that their amp is going to be sitting on stage next to a Fender. But there's no reason that I can't go. I should be able to go get a 1974 inspired current production amp for $699, and I should be able to get the head version of a 20-watt version of a 1987 for $900, and I should be able to buy the combo version for $1,400. But those don't exist, and they should. They have things that may say they have plexi tone, but ugh. Sonny says, what is your opinion of amps that are in the high-end spectrum? Many of the players I listen to use high-end two rocks and Dumbles, and I am totally tempted to join this circle. Dumble, don't worry about Dumbles. Any Dumbles that we can afford are fake, and the real ones cost $40,000 and up. It's crazy, and it won't make you a better player. Two rocks, $4,000 or $5,000, totally worth it. Know that it won't make you a better player, but it may allow you to find the way for you to become a better player, because all of a sudden, like, oh, I've been spending all my time thinking I just need to turn the treble down or turn the treble up or turn the bass down. It just sounds good, so I can just play. So you spend more time creating, more time practicing and enjoying it. It takes an obstacle out of playing. It's like when you start off and you get a guitar with a really high action and sharp fret ends, and you think that every player has, it just hurts to play and everything's hard, and then you get someone's pick up someone's better guitar, and you're like, oh my God, everything I've been fighting is so easy. And if a kid had started on a good Strat versus the $100 Strat copy that didn't play in tune with high action, the kid would make faster progress. To a smaller extent, but the same real extent, starting off, the better the amp that you play is, the better player you can become, because you can spend more time playing, and you'll be encouraged by all that. And you may find that, instead of just playing this and getting this sound, if I just subtly turn my pick, I get a totally different sound. And a cheaper amp won't necessarily show you all these, respond to your playing the same way. So yeah, a two-rock is great. The guy who brought in that PRS Sonzera 50 last week, I fixed it. I gave it back to him. I said, this thing's terrible. He sold it. And he and his dad went to Carter's Vintage in Nashville and got a 1966 Super Reverb, because I watched videos of the kid playing in his band, and I said, for what you do, you would love a Vibrolux reverb or a Super Reverb. You would absolutely love that. And he went and played a whole bunch of Super Reverbs and could not. He was just over the moon. But that was never an amp that had been marketed to him. He thought that was a world for other players, or it was just not for the kind of music he was doing. I'm like, man, you're trying to play like Derek Trucks. Get the Derek Trucks amp. Kind of a jam bandy thing with some Afro-Cuban things in it. It's pretty cool stuff. I'm like, for what you're doing, this is the amp you need, whether you know it or not. Well, he played them, and he and his dad went together for his Christmas present, and the kid is in music school. They've got that, and they're going to bring it to me over the Thanksgiving weekend to make sure that it's 1,000%. So look for a 66 Super Reverb with CTS Alnico speakers coming in. And it's not that he will magically be a better player sounding to us plugged into that than the Sonzera, though the Sonzera is pretty spectacular, crappy. He will be a better player after having spent a year playing that 66 reverb than he would be if he had always just stuck with a Sonzera or a Origin to 50 or whatever. So don't think that you have to go to Tube Rocks or Dumbles to join the circle of high-end Spectrum. You could have a 76 Super Reverb picked up for $900 and take it to a guy like me, spend another $300 getting it quiet and recapped and all the tubes sorted out. And then you get a great player who plays Tube Rocks and Dumbles. Get Jeff Meckerlane to come sit in on your 76 Silverface Super Reverb with a master volume. He's going to sound fantastic because it's an amp that's up to that quality of playing. And, so he's used to that from playing his Dumbles and stuff. But watch Robin Ford do an interview, or he may be doing a Dumble on stage or in the studio, but he does an interview with the guitarist, and they got a Super Reverb sitting there, and he plugs into it, and he sounds just like himself. So it doesn't have to be the highest end to be really good. I'm also a big believer in the AC15C1 for that same reason, and you can get those used for $450. Let's see. Tanner McCage, I think Tube Depot are great. I'm friends with just about everyone who works there. I've had a great relationship with them for years. In fact, part of the 50K celebration for the channel and what I'm doing, as I knock over a light, in conjunction with them and Mojo Tone to celebrate the 50K, part of it's going to be celebrating my 1,000th order from Tube Depot, which I just surpassed apparently. So it's going to have, I think they're fantastic. KTFO Inc. says, please accept my apology. This is my old 60-plus-year-old's first chat. Well, I think you're doing great. You're using words and typing things, and your spelling and grammar are almost legible. So another 60 years, you'll have it down. No, please. I've got people from all over the world for whom English isn't their first language. I've got people from Mississippi for whom English isn't even a language. I say that with love. Tennessee, Mississippi, it's a rivalry thing. So everyone's welcome. This is not you don't have to be a technophile to join in here. Everyone is welcome. Let's see. We are getting to about 20 minutes to the regular stop time. So I'm going to try to go through and find any stuff that I need to answer before the end. I want to make sure no one's missed if I can help it. Well, here's something. A little side note. Yeah, so Brad caught with Jason and Alex yesterday. Glad you met him in person, mate. That might explain your head this morning. I hope they are all similarly suffering. Alex was here earlier, I think. So, you naughty Australians. Let's see. You're in northern British Columbia. I'm not there. Yeah, email me, or maybe Brad will chime in. I've got a guy, Dr. Dan Tramble. He's in Vancouver, but and then R.J. Schmerler, I think, is out there as well. But email me. I'll see what I can do for you, or maybe Brad will. Yeah, all right. Mark Price, here you go. The JCM 800 2203 2007 reissue. The hum circuit, does it really improve the amp, or is it a hindrance? Because it recently smoked my amp. Yeah, those trim pots in the heater supply on those Marshall reissues, the 2203s, 2204s, the 1987s, the 1959s, they all share the same stupid heater balance where there are 200 ohm resistors and then a trim pot. The nice thing about it is the resistors. At one end, there's a turret. At the other side of the hum balance pot is a turret. So remove the resistors, remove the stupid trim pot, and just put 200 ohm or 220 ohm or 247 ohm resistors, flame-proof, across the turret. So you're just replace the stupid trim pot not rated for the current with fixed resistors, and then life is good. Because those things die all the time. Those little blue trim pots were never rated for enough current for heater use. So stupid, but easily fixed, which is a nice combination. If you have to have something stupid that catches on fire, it's nice when the fix at least is cheap and easy. Hey, Joseph from Malta. Wow. It amazes me. We've got people here from all over the world, and I'm just sitting here in Memphis. Let's see here. Phil and Catherine Muzio say, I do not use the standby on my AC30. Leave it in the on position. Just use the power switch. This is correct, yes. The only AC30s where you would want to use a standby, make sure this is true. I don't know about the AC30S because I've not had one of those in. I suspect that's the case. The AC30C series, the custom series, not the custom classic, but the custom series, the C2 and C2X, you'd want to use a standby on that because it's a solid state rectifier, and the unloaded B plus is kind of sort of approaching the max filter cap values, but mostly because it's got a cathode follower, and with a cathode follower, if you have full B plus on the grid before the cathode warms up, you can damage the tube. Any AC30 with the tube rectifier, which is the majority of them, not only do you not need to use the standby, it's best not to, because in a lot of them they switch the HT center tap, whether that's connected to ground or not, with the standby, and that kills rectifier tubes. The exception is the TBX, which actually breaks the AC HT feed from the transformer to the rectifier tube, in which case it is totally safe to use, but there's absolutely no reason to use it because it doesn't protect anything. So if your AC30 has a tube rectifier, which is the vast majority of them, don't use standby if the amp has it. Just leave it as you're doing it now. The only exception is the C series, which has a solid state rectifier. Let's see. Blue light flashes in the power tubes. If they're big flashes, that's problems. But sometimes there'll be a blue glow in a power tube, Ted C., in which case it's okay. He's got a Hot Rod Deluxe, and when it's cranked, it's got a crackle sound. I would not worry about blue glow in power tubes unless it's a big flash, which would be unusual. If you're qualified, check that the screen grid resistors are still good. Those commonly fail in Hot Rod Deluxes, and the fix for that is just to put in a new 3-watt 470 ohm or 1K mounted above the PC board rather than beneath it. It moves it farther away from the heat source of that tube. And watch your tubes, octal socket solder joints. But in general, Hot Rod Deluxe, if you've already done the filter caps and dealt with the low voltage supply, and the 82K, 100K plate resistors of the phase inverter also should be replaced typically, mostly in the earlier ones. The later ones aren't so bad. Usually, as long as you don't bias it too hot, bias it about 60%, and you should be good. KTFO says, pair character bowing down saying thank you. Okay, I don't know what that means, but thank you very much. I got a super sticker. I have a feeling that if I were looking on YouTube, I would see a pair character bowing down saying thank you. On the app that I'm actually using to do this stream, it just says pair character bowing down saying thank you, which is a bit whelming, but I appreciate the thought and the super sticker. Thank you. Chris Harrop, you got a 64 Super on the bench today. In general, if I have a 64 anything, and if I think one cap is better than another, I will order the better cap, and the amp needs to wait for it. In general. In this case, of 100 microfarad, 100 volt is fine. It won't hurt anything. I like to use as little filtering as possible in a biased supply because I want that biased supply to be fully up and operational before the HT supply, before the output tubes really have any current. I want their bias to be there. But that would be more of an issue in a bandmaster or some other amp which has solid state rectification, where that's going to be a fast on thing, where I want the bias to be on before that. So I think 100 microfarad will be just fine. I've certainly put plenty in them. But in general, as a principle, if I think this amp should have 50 microfarad or 47 microfarad versus 100, and I only have 100, if it's a 64 Super Reverb, I'll order the damn thing and let the client know that I'm waiting for a part. Mr. Anderson. That's my middle name, actually. So I am also Mr. Anderson from a certain point of view. Do you know what amps Huey Lewis and the News were using on the sports record? No, I do not. I would imagine that there's probably a lot of JC120 and Twin Reverb on there, but I don't know what else is used. The overdrive sounds on that stuff sounds much like a pedal. I know that there's some Marshalls in some of the videos they did, but I have no idea what they used. I was thinking the other day, not that I spend a lot of time thinking about Huey Lewis in the News, not to put them down, they had massive success and seemed to be a real good bar band, and Huey Lewis seems like he was a really good singer and seemed like a nice guy. Power of Love has some cool little funk guitar parts in it. It was on the radio, and for once in decades, I didn't instantly change the channel. I listened to the thing again, but it's got some interesting little R&B parts with some chorus on there. It sounded like a compressor pedal and a Strat into a JC120 for the most part. I would imagine probably twin JC120 and some form of a JCM 800 would be the likely suspects. Maybe with an OD2 or OD3 or something. Let's see. Gooden says he's like 17 minutes behind on the live stream. Happens to him every time. Well, if you hover over the stream itself, there'll either be I can't do it on my thing, but I can do it on here. If you, like right now, my iPad says -8. It says -6, and then has a white dot and says live. If I press live, it goes to red dot and catches me up. So you can do that on your end as well. God, it looks so fat. I don't know, guys. Should I change the lighting and angle so I look better, or should I look into the whole diet and exercise thing? I can do the camera so that I look a lot better if I were to do the entire chat like this, for instance. But I'm sitting back here being fat and lazy, and I hate this. I had some health issues, and I've put on a lot of weight, and it does not match my sense of myself because I had myself down. Oh, I was looking so good 7 years ago. It's hard. It's hard, man. But I'm not here to be a supermodel, which is a damn good thing. Let's see. Blue flashes. Blue glow is normal, Ted C. Blue flashes is not normal. So I would need a little more to look at that. Trying to. This is the part of the stream every week or every 2 weeks where it's hard to find the questions because people are getting patient, waiting for me to answer questions. Then they start talking about everything, which is not. I'm not complaining. It's just fun. AD115 does not have a choke. It's not going to really affect anything that much, Joseph. If you to do it briefly, if you have a choke, you need less capacitance filtering on the screen node. If you don't have a choke, you need more screen filtering. You can get the same place either way. Especially in an AD15, which is going to be cathode biased, it's going to be pretty much a constant current draw, so you're not going to get much variation through a choke or a resistor. Gear King, I don't recall which amp is the 5E5 versus the 5E5A. Sorry. Yeah, Matt's saying about the same thing. Hey, Mitch, the metalhead. Check out my amps under $500 video for the longer version of this, but avoid the Vox AC10C. They're garbage. They're utter and complete garbage. People will argue with me, but those people are wrong. If $600 is your price, there's some really fantastic choices in the amps under $500 video. But the AC15C is a great amp. The AC10C is utter trash. I'm not a big fan of Marshall Power Breaks, Joseph. Graphite and cigars. Magnetone amps are by and large pretty good. Some of them are Fender amps with a Magnetone tremolo circuit added to it rather than being the actual Magnetone circuit from back in the day. And some of them are not amps that Magnetone ever made. They're much more like a Fender Tweed hybrid with a Vox. And I've not had any of the Billy Gibbons models in, but I think they might be a little overpriced for what you get. But I've not had one in that I thought was bad. There's one model, I don't remember the name of it. It's basically their AC15 variant, where they had the cathode bias way too hot, and it was killing output tubes on two of them. One player had two of them, and they were both amps were having the same failure of output tubes. And I changed the resistor there to get them biased like a JMI would be, about 14 watts, and those would last longer. So I don't think they're quite as good as the price tag indicates, but they're not far from it. Let's see. Trying to get through the rest of the question. I'm trying to remember to keep my mouth shut so I'm not sitting here going. All right. Seb Robertson says, hey, Lyle, chasing a ghost with intensity pot causes temporary voltage spikes when turned. It's a 73 super reverb. Any thoughts? I've recapped filters and checked all resistors on board. Well, the intensity pot is in series to ground after the coupling cap of the vibrato channel, and after that are the two mix resistors. So it's the path to ground after the coupling cap of the vibrato channel, and the normal channel goes through two 220K resistors before going through the intensity pot to zero. So if that intensity pot has its wiper separate from the track anywhere, it can be physically damaged or it could be dirt, then you're going to get a big volume increase because you're losing a voltage divider. So I would probably just change out that pot. It's easy to get that 100K pot, or clean it and see if it works. But it's not going to be a resistor if that's what it's doing. It's not going to be the filters, though it's always good to have new filters in those. Clean that pot, and if it doesn't do it, change it out for another 100K. And then Matt Fields just said the same thing. Let's see, all right. I don't think I'm going to be able to go through all the remaining questions systematically. I've got to start going shopping for groceries for Thanksgiving and all that fun stuff. Thank you, PF. I appreciate that. The mic placement videos, there's going to be more of those to come, so I'm glad you like them. And Tim Connors, just you can swap preamp tubes when you're in standby if you want. Won't hurt a thing. Thanks, Mark Price. I appreciate that. That's very kind of you. Appreciate that. Let's see. I'm going to try to wrap up. Mason from where's my brain today? If he sees this, he's going to kill me. Mason from Vertex Effects. He's got a family who lives in Memphis, and he's in town for this week, so I'm going to meet him for coffee or a beer. He was kind enough to have me on his chat a couple months back, and it's always neat to meet other people in this crazy industry. And also gives us an excuse to avoid relatives for a short period of time during Thanksgiving. I don't find any reason for there ever to be a grid leak bias input or causality. I mean, it has a different sound, but it's got a lot of drawbacks to it. But if someone's used to it, they're going to like it. But it's easy to. I've done an amp where with a switch you can change between the two, and I just don't see the reason for it myself. Thank you, Phil and Catherine Muzio. And again, I don't. Okay, there on the. I see the sticker that says victory on my iPad, but here it says. I wish I had one of those robot voices. Hippo character flips around and does a V sign with his hand while the word victory appears in the background. Yeah, AC10C and Nitrain are landfill amps, very much so, sadly. The books questions, Stephen Thomas, we get asked about that every stream. I need to have to do one of those pull down things for that as well, just to be able to have good answers ready to go on that kind of thing. Let's see. I don't know about the Tone Master Iron Man 2. Sorry, Dan, of New Jersey. The Tone King ones. I would Google that, but I've not had experience with it. All right, we are down to the end. It is time to wrap up. I hope everyone has a good Thanksgiving for those of us who do that. For the rest of the world, I hope you have a good Thursday or Friday if you're one of them strange Australian types. Brad, I hope you die happily soon or get better. Your choice. Either one works. And look for many Marshalls. So that's 3 vintage Marshalls in right now, and the vintage Vox, and a constant stream of Fenders. And I'll have some other goodies coming in as well, and new microphones with which to play. This will be fun, but I'm going to go fight a bunch of little old ladies to get that last can of whatever, because that's what Thanksgiving is a time to bring out competitive buying, and I'm good at it. See you guys later next week. Actually, no, real fast. Not next week. First Saturday in December will be the next technical difficulties and pending scheduling, because we talked about this a while ago, and I need to remind him that he agreed to do it, make sure the time and date still works. But I really hope so, because I hope to be saying with some authority that next guest of technical difficulties will be the very own wonderful polishing Ted Woodford of T. Woodford Guitars, one of the best channels I've ever seen on YouTube, one of my favorite channels. Does amazing work, primarily on acoustic instruments, but also electric guitars. And everyone says that they like X, Y, and Z about my channel or my voice or my approach. And that's how I feel about Ted's channel. I watch him and I'm just amazed by his persistence and his knowledge and his care and his craft, and also his education and how his brain works. And I think that it's going to be a fun conversation. I just needed to get in touch with Ted and make sure that that particular Saturday at that particular time is still working for him. If not, it may be a slightly different day and time. But I've been looking forward to talking to Ted for a long time. I've not met him yet, just a few emails. But I think it's going to be fun. So that will be the next time that we all get together here. And I look forward to that very much. See you then.